So, hi there, and welcome to this week's podcast of Happiness is an Inside Job. And I hope you've been keeping well and, above all else, treating yourself well since our last podcast. So, today we're going to kick off talking about relationships. And why? Because the quality of our relationships is a big part of what determines the quality of our life. Our connections with others give us greater sense of happiness, fulfillment, and they're a huge part of the human experience. We're actually hardwired for connection. In fact, the World Health Organization has recently released statistics that prove that the lack of quality relationships in our lives is killing us faster than obesity and lack of exercise. And that's why it's pivotal that we work on our relationships and, above all, our relationship with ourselves. Our neurons actually begin to die off without connection. Isolation does us detrimental harm, and we've all seen some of that or been impacted in some way coming out of the pandemic. We've seen with our own eyes how bad an effect that isolation has on us. And they did a study over a number of years on prisoners in America, and that showed that only 5% of the entire prison population in America were in isolation or solitary confinement. Yet that 5%, out of that 5%, they accounted for over 50% of the suicides within prisons. And that shows you how absolutely detrimental that isolation or solitary confinement is to us. So then you might ask yourself, why does Linda say that happiness is an inside job and your main relationship is actually with yourself, huh? Because the relationship that you have with you dictates everything else, every other relationship. Who else you choose to be in a relationship with, the friends you choose, the partner you choose, how you allow yourself to be treated in a relationship, whether you stay in a toxic or abusive relationship, how you treat others. That all comes from what you think and believe about yourself, what you believe your value and your worth is, effectively your relationship with yourself. So the one-liner here is, guys, your internal value of you dictates the quality of your external relationships. And this week we will focus on the partner relationship, that intimate or sexual relationship, that marriage. There's so many different ways of describing this, that partner, that girlfriend, that boyfriend. So I'm sure that you all know what I mean without me naming every different scenario there that we have. So part of the reason we're going to focus on this is because our significant other, our intimate relationship is of primal importance to us. And unfortunately, we all know that the stats are 40% of marriages end in divorce, and even higher again, 60 to 70% of cohabiting relationships break down. So you do an average on that, and that's over half of all relationships that break down or fall apart. And this has a huge impact, a huge negative impact on our mental health. So where and why do relationships start breaking down and fall apart? In part, usually, when we believe that we require the other person to be happy, when we see ourselves and we all hear that saying, me other half, the better half, where we see ourselves as half of a whole, incomplete without that other person. And we start believing that we need that other person to be complete. Without that person, we're not going to be complete because, folks, as I always say, happiness is an inside job. We cannot give someone else happiness. We cannot create internal happiness for someone else. Of course, we can absolutely add to it by loving them. But if the other person is unhappy or does not feel lovable or worthy or good enough, they're not receiving that love no matter what you do. And it's like pushing sand up a hill. You cannot make them feel that love or feel happier within themselves. So this is where things can potentially start falling apart. And here is where it can go completely belly up. Some of the biggest killers in relationships, and this is one of the biggest of all, guys, are unmet expectations. Like, we expect the other person to know what it is we need or want, even though we don't know what it is that we need or want. We expect this other person, we believe that you should know me. You should know that I need to feel appreciation, love, support, back up in particular situations, for you to defend me when I need to be defended. And we assume that the other person knows this, knows what you want or need, a lot of the time without even telling them. And then your expectations aren't met. And that in itself is a breeding ground for frustration and irritation. And then we start acting out of this place. And what we fail to do for ourselves and for the relationship is actually speak and ask for what it is that we want. I want your support. I need you to show me, and this is what I need you to do to show me I'm appreciated, I'm loved, I'm wanted, any of those things, because our own fears are holding us back. We're afraid we're going to be judged, we're going to be rejected, we're going to be seen as who we really are, and we're not going to be good enough to be in this relationship. So we don't communicate that, and instead we begin communicating through frustration and anger. And what this drives over time is disengagement. And they say that the biggest and the leading cause of all relationship breakdowns is disengagement, indifference. When we start disconnecting and shutting ourselves off from the other person because we feel wounded or hurt to protect ourselves. And the sad thing is, what we tend to feel wounded or hurt about is things that we just haven't communicated, things we haven't asked for. So the other person is coming from what they think you want or need, and you're on the other side of the fence thinking that they know what it is you think that you want or that you need. And then both parties are just getting frustrated and upset and overwhelmed. And it's making it more unlikely that those pivotal conversations are going to happen, because more hurt passes from one side of the fence to the other, more offences, more disrespect, more arguments. And this is where the disengagement, which is the absolute killer of relationships, and the disconnect. Because let's face it, guys, feeling indifferent to someone is one of the worst kind of feelings. One of the essential reasons we actually connect with people is to feel like that we matter, to know we matter. So it hurts hugely to us if people treat us with indifference. If we feel like we don't matter, it makes us less likely to ask for what it is that we need, and then we become indifferent ourselves to protect ourselves, and therefore causing the breakdown of that relationship. And a lot of the time it's not that the love isn't there, it's that the communication or lack of communication became absolutely toxic to the relationship and just caused a huge amount of hurt on either side. And another thing that we can then tend to start doing within our relationships is, one of our biggest fears in relationships is either losing the other person or losing ourselves by trying to be everything that we think the other person wants or needs. And how that can happen is never actually asking the other person what they want or need, never communicating ourselves what it is that we want or need. So we try and chameleon, morph, become what we believe that they want or need, and end up hurting ourselves, end up getting frustrated and angry that even when we've become what we believed that they need, they're still not happy, and you're also unhappy because you're not showing up as who you truly are. So here's the thing, the absolutely fundamental thing. When you get the opportunity, be it now, if you're in your car or when you're at home, look in the mirror. Because that person looking back at you is the person who did not meet your needs or your expectations first. That's the person that truly let you down within the relationship, because that's the person who did not speak up or ask for what it was that you needed. That's the person sometimes who just assumes the other person would know what you needed, because we are afraid of being vulnerable. We learned how to be in relationships from the first relationship we've seen, from our relationships at home when we were children. And the parts of those that we seen that we didn't like, or we seen pain or arguments, they're now within the relationships that we're in as adults. If we haven't looked at them, they're the parts that we're reacting out, or we're building barriers to protect ourselves off from things that we've seen in the past. Not necessarily things that are actually showing up in our own relationship now. We don't allow them to show up because we have barriers put in place for them. We don't ask for what we need. All of us were poor communicators. We need to build the skill of communication. We don't ask for what we want or what we need because our greatest fear is rejection. It's losing the loved one, because they're absolutely paramount to us. So what we begin to actually do is, unfortunately, we reject ourselves. We put our own feelings, our own needs, our own wants, our own hobbies, the things we want to do, who we want to be. We put all of that on the back burner. We start rejecting what we want ourselves. So that's what I mean when I say, look in the mirror and you want to see the person that did not meet your expectations. That is you. You rejected your own needs, you hid them and you took them away to be a version of what you thought that the other person needed. And that is the core breakdown within our relationships. So how do we begin to start changing that? And here's a quote, guys, and I absolutely love this one. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And as I say, I absolutely love that one, because we assume, because we communicate from where we are, that the other person understands that style of communication or knows what it is that we want. And again, it's looking at our own style of communication, how we show up for ourselves. Do we hint around what we might want? Do we drop little bombs every so often of, look, I don't want anything for my birthday, but doesn't that restaurant look lovely? These kind of things. Are we hinting and bumping around the things that we want? Are we being a little passive aggressive? Communication, assertive, confident communication, is going in and going, okay, what is I want the outcome of this to be? What am I looking for here? I'm looking to feel more appreciated, more respected, more loved, have more fun within our relationships. For the other person to make the bed, make the call, have that conversation with the kids, whatever it may be, what is the outcome you're looking for? And then what is the best way of communicating that across? And one of the things that I really like, again, within our communication, another saying is, build, don't break. Don't go into a conversation with, you've always done this, you never do this. You're dragging up the past and you're beginning to create conflict and not building good communication. Let all that go. Build. Go in with, I realise that you have tried to do it this way, or that you're doing this. Build. Don't be critical. Don't be judgmental. And think about, you don't like to feel criticised. You don't like to feel judged. So look at it from the other person's perspective and look at what the things that they don't want to feel. So build, don't break. Go in with what the outcome is that you want, and you know this person. What is the best way of getting it? What's the best way of communicating that across? And above all else, it's being vulnerable. Being vulnerable means risking emotional exposure. Woo! We all protect ourselves. We all guard ourselves. We learn to show up completely within our relationships. And vulnerability is exposing ourselves emotionally. Emotionally, I mean no other way of exposure, people. We're just being raw and open about what we actually need. If you're not feeling loved, if you're not feeling respected, if you're not feeling that that person cares about you, it's actually saying that and just that. Not you make me feel this. No, just I am feeling unloved, disrespected. My time isn't valued. You don't see what I am feeling, not you make me feel. Nobody can make you feel something you don't already believe about yourself. So again, we're going back to the relationship. It starts with you and how you feel about yourself. Because here's something the old Einstein fella said, guys, and you know he's smart. You cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking that got you there. So by doing the exact same things, it's like you're sitting at home and you're looking at your walls and they're grey. And you're sitting there and you're going, I am sick of looking at that grey. And you come home tomorrow night and you're looking at grey. And the next night and the next night and the next night. What's the way of changing them walls? Taking action, doing something different, going out and buying a paint tin and actually changing the colour that those walls are painted. Taking action and making change. A lot of the time where our communication within our relationships, because of our fear of vulnerability, we communicate from our old fear patterns. We communicate from possibly a defensive space, an angry space, a fearful space. So it's looking at how you're stepping up in your relationship, how you're asking for what you want and you need and coming from there. Take out the painting, paint it differently. Not your partner, just the walls, and start making those changes. If you carry it, the definition of madness is doing the same thing 1,000 times, but expecting a different outcome. If we want change, we need to change. Because as I say, guys, with our relationships, they are very, very important to our happiness. And a lot of the time, relationships don't break down because the love no longer existed. They tend to break down hugely because the communication never existed. And over time, that became toxic. And that's what drove the contempt, the frustration, the eventual disengagement, indifference. And that's what brought the relationship to the end, or to a toxic space that it's in, or an unhappy space that it's in. So if you want to make the changes, A, start looking at yourself and how you're communicating, and B, stop and in the moment, look at the other person you're communicating with and ask yourself, what's the goal? What's the value there? Because if you truly do underneath it all, love this person, and a part of loving yourself is working on keeping that person also in your life and building on your own happiness. So as I've said, guys, it's looking in the mirror at yourself, shifting your communication, looking at where you're not communicating your needs, learning the art, practicing, and it is, of course, uncomfortable, being vulnerable, opening up and saying, this makes me sad. I am unhappy because I'm feeling anxious, because I need your support, because open up and saying these sentences, showing yourself, showing who you are. And again, build, don't break. Don't tear the other person down with criticism or judgment that potentially has you where you are or is keeping you on the road that you're going down. And you're guaranteed neither of you want to be there. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about, or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye bye.